as quick as a gunslinger's draw. You send them along, put them behind and move on. If you're driving once, you drive me by the Boneyard, where the maypoles and black dragons come to rest. We'll be holding vigil around the globe at midnight, in the middle of fun.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for dialing in. This is the Roman Anton Podcast. I'm Roman Anton. I'm in Bangkok, Thailand, and I have I'm going to say he's a very good friend, and we'll see what he says in response to that. But I have Darren Murphy on the podcast today, and I'm very excited. He's in Austin, Texas. Darren Murphy, can you hear me?
How's it going?
It's great. It's great having you on. Well, look, I'm really excited to do this. I had a trip down memory lane in a lot of respects because I grabbed this walking in the door. This is something that Frank has made, and you talked to Frank. Frank's over at the control board here, but this is a fake cassette. But this is a cassette. This has our first launch of music on it. But I raised this up. It has an MP3 stick in it. When I met you in '95 or '96, you handed me a cassette for onward delivery to someone else. But I threw it in the car on the way home because that's what we did in 1996, right? And it had a collection of cover songs, Beatles songs on it. And the reason I bring that up is to sort of ground us a little bit. That's a long time ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and those tapes, Frank, this stuff was so crazy. I think the first one you had on, you couldn't have put Because on there first, but this is a Beatles song that Darren did all the harmonies for, if I'm not mistaken, all of the vocals. And it's a non-instrument song, right? And I heard it, and I was like, well, he forgot to erase a song or something. Like, what's the deal here? It's a Beatles song on this Beatles cover tape. So it was just really an astonishing moment for me. And that was our introduction as either friends or as whatever we were then, as an intermediary. But I was hooked, right? You had me at hello, Jerry Maguire talk. So I thought that through. Does that resonate with you? Does that make sense how we met then?
Yes,
right.
I think it does.
Yeah.
Those recordings, which are now known as the Fab Forgeries,
Right.
are something I did over a period of years when I was just teaching myself how to produce and how to do multi-track recording. And I had some really cheap gear. I had a 4-track cassette machine, but Robert Harrison, on the other hand, used a machine a lot like that to record Kon-Tiki. So it turned out that it was actually a viable form of technology at that time. So I would, in between making my own demos, I would just explore and play with some knobs and play with some faders and play with some compression levels, and let's see how close we could get to an actual Beatles recording.
Right.
And let's just see what happens.
Yeah.
And so the rest is history or non-history,
Yes.
however you look at it.
So do you find yourself peddling those anymore to folks to listen to, like when you run into the true Beatles fans, and I'm sure on the White Album tour, which we'll get to later, you ran into folks who would spend hours talking to you about this stuff, and it could come up naturally that you'd say, hey, I've taken a shot at doing some of those too on my own. Or are they sort of a historical thing for you now?
I find that people actually peddle me for them. They said, hey, play me these tapes that I keep hearing about.
Yeah. And where do you go? Do you have them online still?
I used to.
Right.
I had them on DarinMusic.com,
right,
which is now defunct.
Right.
But I should make them available. I usually just kind of like, I'll send you an MP3.
Yeah.
But those recordings have taken me into some places that I never imagined I would go.
I can imagine.
I used them to get my foot in the door when I heard that they were holding auditions for a John Lennon musical on Broadway.
Right.
And those recordings went straight to the director, writer, creator, who then called me up and said, please come to New York and audition for this show.
Right. So that's a jump forward of years. And I went to see you in New York at that show, and you were kind enough to get me a ticket, or I paid for it, I forget which, but we spent a little bit of time together when you were there. And I saw that, and I remember that hook. And so I thought, boy, it's so funny. I don't know why the website was an easier place to accommodate putting that out than all these other social media platforms. You know, I thought he's not keeping these from people. It's just there's not as convenient a place to send people than you had it on the website, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I tried, but I could not put them on YouTube.
Yeah, I imagine.
Because YouTube just cut them off and said, oh, this is copyright material. Apparently, it came too close.
Yeah.
So they said, nope.
Right, you need to be on some other streaming thing. Like I would imagine Spotify would immediately send money to Apple or whoever gets that cash when they played. But it's just funny. I'm sorry to dwell on that, but it was. I spent so much time listening to those when I traveled, and I would never carry it with me because we didn't download stuff as much then, and I'd go to the website, right? So however much traffic you had, I was consistently dialing in to listen to those because they're enjoyable for me to listen. So that was my entree to you, and I hope folks who are listening and are know Darin Murphy or are meeting Darin Murphy through this podcast, barrage him with all sorts of social media requests to look for the Fab Forgeries because they're fantastic. But, when they make their way to a convenient spot, they're really fun to listen to, and it really, I think, sums up a lot of how I understand you go about your work processes. There's a tremendous amount of dedication to those. And it was obvious. And I continue to see that even in your most recent work, Wasting Our Time, just the composition of that. So the other end of the spectrum, right, or a more recent song of yours. So it's interesting. And so this week was a little bit about my re-exploring your body of work and trying to give my own understanding to it as it's evolved, because there's certainly, in my mind, been an evolution. And it really didn't become as clear to me until I looked at your On the Roof session from last August, which was something you told me to take a look at when we talked a while ago. You said, hey, take a look at this thing that I put out there if you're interested. I thought that it really sounded good, and it was really an interesting format. And you stared at the camera and you play your songs for an hour. And it was just very interesting to me to see you sort of do that on the rooftop with such good audio, and you played it, and it was just nice video to see too. And as the night fell, I thought it was a really cool thing. So it was trip down memory lane this week. So I'm sorry if I had to get that off my chest for you.
No, that's cool. Last year was such a unique time for music because nobody could do anything.
Yeah.
Nobody could play live, and so live streams on Facebook and YouTube were the only way that people could communicate with their audience.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, this delay is messing with my ability to speak. But anyway, hang on. I'll just turn it off while I'm talking and then turn it back on.
Sorry about that.
It was the only way that artists could communicate directly with their audience and also get new fans along the way. So the best way to do that is just to look right into the camera and try to make a connection that way. And I had a lot of competition because everybody was doing it.
Yeah.
And there's an incentive to find something that's a little bit unique. And so it's like, well, rather than sit in my living room or sit on my porch or sit in my little recording studio, why not just go up on the roof? I have easy access. It's safe.
Yeah.
And it's cool. It's a cool little aesthetic. And I was so inspired by some other artists I was seeing that just improvised so well and flowed so well, and thought, okay, I'm just going to go up and sing what matters to me and hope that people enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, those are good comments for me to hear because, it's an hour set, about 45 minutes in, maybe 40, maybe 35. You do 2 Lennon back-to-back songs, I think. It's Real Love, I guess, is the name of the song. I always forget if it's Real Love or It's Real Love. And then Love is Real. Real is Love is the title, I think, right?
Yeah, it's just the first one was just called Love.
Love, okay.
And then the other one was called Real Love.
Okay.
And I always thought it was interesting that those 2 songs are in the same key and about the same tempo, just the way that Lennon wrote them and recorded them. And they're so similar in subject. Love is real, it's real love.
Yeah, and the placement wasn't lost on me if the titles were. I apologize for that, but the placement in that song, but it really brought me back to the Fab Forgeries because I was like, wow, does this sound, this is right on. I mean, and I know you weren't up there doing your best Lennon impersonation, but the way you interpreted the song and played it, I was like, holy smokes, is this, I mean, it was interesting how well those songs were. So interesting to watch the evolution again, even in what you're doing now. So that was a cool thing you're doing. But let me back up here. Let me try and stick to a plan that I had. Hey, we meet in the '90s, and at that time you were also writing and recording demos, like you said, for 2 of your earlier releases, 2 albums. So there was the first one, and I'm not sure if you say Solitarium or Solitarium. I'm not sure if they
Solitarium.
Solitarium. 99 release date. I think I heard some of the songs, and one I wanted to ask you about that didn't make it on there, which I think was called Retrograde. You released that in 99, and I think you'd played a little bit of it for me in 98 or maybe even 97, some of the songs. I remember 15 Minutes being one of the earlier songs that I got. But it was a handful of songs, maybe 12 songs I think I wrote down when I was looking at it this week, 12 songs. And you released that, and more or less, you played everything on the album, right? Drums,
yes, on
bass.
Solitarium, I played everything on it.
Yeah.
And I think that I had, my sister Trish came in and helped with the vocals on one song. I think it was Stuck in a Hole.
That's right.
But that was the challenge. My producer, Daryl Klingman, said, you should play everything on it. I want it to sound like what you gave me on those tapes.
Yeah,
that's
that's
okay.
Interesting. And so, at that point in your career, or in your sort of musical development, I don't know if you call it a career or a lifestyle or life, or at that point, were you disproportionately a drummer as opposed to other instruments? Were there 50,000 hours on drums and 10,000 on guitar when you sat down and said, I'm going to play everything? Or was your arsenal pretty mixed and pretty even?
At that time, it was pretty mixed, but there was a heavy emphasis on drums because that was how I was making most of my money at that time. Yeah. I was playing for several different people. I was playing for Trish. I was playing for Carol Howell. I did some work with Soul Hat there at some point.
That's right.
But I was also playing guitar and fronting my own band and trying to get my own music out there. But for me, drums is my primal instrument. Without that, in my foundation, there really is nothing else. So I had spent an enormous amount of time improving my drumming skills. And that actually made the album better because everything starts with the drums. Yeah. So I'd go in, get a click going in my headphones, do a few takes of the drums. And if I had something really, really solid, really tight drum track, that made everything so much easier.
That's interesting. I mean, so... drummer by definition, I guess your own definition with solid hours, you're teaching, playing with other folks, having your own gigs, and you do guitar, and there's quite a bit of other stuff happening on that album. So I'm not trying to ruin the surprise if you listen to it, but it's the only other person, I guess there's 2 that I know of that I've listened to. I think Lenny Kravitz did a similar stunt for his first album. I think Jason Faulkner did that for one of his albums. So these are people that I know probably through you or through other folks that you know. So it's interesting, but I thought, wow, that was a significant undertaking. And I mean, to me, on the 2 albums, I sort of thought, which one do I like more, or which have I listened to more? It's dramatically in favor of Solitarium. So I would say it's a 70-30 split, with a lot of numbers for both. And I realized that you had a sequence of songs, Don't Look at Me Down, and She's Better Than Me. So with a flick of your wrist, you can jump songs pretty quickly. But those are the 3 that I would run through habitually, and I would classify them as sort of rocking or up-tempo songs, right? And they were all 3 on there, and I think they were in the demo bucket that you gave me. She's Better Than Me wasn't, but I think 2 of those were. And I'd never asked you about how you write. I mean, if you are a drummer, and if you were going to play everything, and if you were writing some of these later, closer to the time you went into the studio, what was the writing project? I mean, can you write a song on drums? Does Darin write a song on drums, or is it always a guitar, or is it some mix, or is it always, if you're on your bike, you can come up with it and write it in your head? Or tell me a little bit about that, because I want to ask the questions as you move from album 1 to album 2, if that process changed as well.
Sure. Everything on Solitarium was written on guitar. It all started with guitar. Mm-hmm. And, I'd just be sitting here with a guitar, and hooks would show up, and I'll just, flesh them out as much as I can. And then I take it into my little recording room, turn on the 4-track, and I knew, okay, well, everything's got to start with the drums. So what are the drums going to sound like? And a lot of times I didn't know what it was going to sound like until I put on the finishing touch, till I put on the last harmony or the last guitar track. But at some point I figured, okay, well, it needs to feel like this needs a Ringo feel, or this needs a Frosty Smith feel, or this needs some soup stirring brush. So that's just kind of how. But basically everything revolves around what's happening on the guitar.
So lyrics.
If it doesn't work as a guitar demo, then I'd toss it away pretty quickly.
Yeah, lyrics and melody come at the same time, or are you plowing through this with the hopes that you get some illumination with good lyrics? So how does that work? Do you ever start, she must be wondering, you must be wondering. I mean, do you ever start with a lyric and a melody and then go get your guitar?
Yeah, in fact, that song, You Must Be Wondering, it started exactly like that.
Yeah, okay.
Because I just actually ripped that off from a record that Mad Magazine put out back in the 70s. And there was this little thing, why you must be wondering, why you must be wondering. And so I just kind of started playing and started singing that. Yeah. And that was that tune. And then everything else just started showing up after that.
Yeah, I mean, there's something uncanny about that end that made me think this is clearly the hook that he wrote around, even though it's the title. I know it's easy to guess, but I thought this seems to be the anchor of this song, that end part, you must be wondering, where you repeat it. And I thought this is one of, you have a lot of sort of outros or ends that are different than traditional conventional songs, just sort of slam and shut or ending. And that's one. And I always wondered, I wonder if, this, I imagine these songs all have a different genesis, all start differently. They could all start on guitar, but the way you get to them. So that when you said you had a lyric and a melody and you went with it, and so you brought guitar. Were there any that you sat on the drums and started writing? Did you ever start a song on your drum kit?
On that one, no, I don't think so.
Because I could see, like, Funky Flying Chair, which is the opening track, I could see you saying to me when I asked this question, what is your most accomplished drumming on that album? It could be the first song, because it has those sort of dot, and there's some really cool drumming when you have those bursts of the guitar sort of that go for 4 or 6 or 8 beats. I forget how many. But it's clearly the drummer's getting to have fun at that part, right? And I thought, I wonder if he wrote that first, like, and then the riff, but it was sort of drum song first, and so it just gets back to how you write and how it evolves. And does the drumming ever outpace the other instruments once you're in that studio? And do you do editing?
Sometimes it does, yeah. Because I was getting a lot of inspiration from Dave Grohl around the time that I was writing that stuff, because that was my primary motivation. I was listening to the first Foo Fighters album, and Grohl was so prolific and so free-spirited and playing everything on that record. And it just gave me so much energy. And between him and then hearing stuff from Beck and hearing stuff from Jeff Tweedy and Wilco, and then going back and listening to some old John Prine and some old Tom Petty, I thought, well, if these guys can do it, why can't I do it?
Yeah.
Why can't it be good?
Yeah.
If the songs are good, then the recording can be good.
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't heard you say that, and that doesn't mean we haven't talked about it and I forgot it, but I think I would remember that, because I remember part of the history of that time when we were together. There was, I think we were watching Fastball, Britt Daniels, Bob Schneider, all in the Austin music scene at that time. Maybe I was watching that and you were as well. I don't recall. And I remember the Fastball album sort of getting moved a little bit or getting less priority because of the Foo Fighters release. So I remember even having temporal awareness of these competing albums being out there, if I'm not mistaken. That could be a bad fact, and someone can call me an idiot after this release of
I'm
this.
glad you mentioned that, because
Good.
my first home landing experience, if you will, took place at the Electric Lounge in 1995. And everybody that I would come to identify with in the music scene was there that night to see Magneto USA before they became Fastball.
You and I were there.
And Cotton Mather right before they went over to Japan for their first Japan tour.
Yeah, I was there too.
And Britt Daniel was there in the audience. My future producer, Lars Goranson, was there. Journalist Mindy LeBurns was there. Yeah. And it was an electrifying scene and an amazing night. And it was that night specifically when I said, this is my home. Yeah. Here I am. Yeah, after a year or so of trying to find out where I fit in, boom, this is it.
Yeah, I remember that song on that album, Are You Ready for the Fallout, was going to be the hit single off that album. And I remember Human Torch, and I just remember how explosive that album was. And I remember hearing it that night. I was like, what in the world? This is so awesome. But that's interesting, because I remember that as if it were yesterday, but I don't remember driving there or how I got home or where I was even staying. But I remember those events. So I
may have given you all the tape that night.
It could have been. I mean, it could have been.
I remember being in the parking lot of the Electric Lounge and say, hey, will y'all listen to this? The tape kind of flies in slow motion through the air, and there's the 2001 Space Odyssey theme playing, and
and I catch it on the
yeah.
Okay, that was it. All right, well, rewrite it. It wasn't on your friend's lawn where I was interloping anyway, so I was a mere bystander to all of this coolness. I had nothing to do with it. And so I'm listening to Solitarium, walking through it and saying, what's the hardest song for Darin to play in his own album? And I'm not saying tonight, if you had to pick it up, what would you forget first? Because that's always a challenge. But did you have difficulty putting stuff down, or were you totally on top of all of it through, and it was a recording? It was easy because you'd played them all 50 million times and you knew what you're doing. Or were they challenging to you at that point? And I'm not sure if that makes sense or if that's an immature musician's question to an expert.
Some of it was easy because I demoed it in advance at the house on 4-track cassette. So I already knew how like the bass, that was pretty easy. It was just a matter of nailing it and getting it in the right place, getting all the notes to land at the right place. The guitar stuff was easy. Difficult stuff was piano, because I'm not a very good piano player. Yeah. So I was trying to make that sound decent and not ham-fisted. And then there were a couple of instruments that I'd never played before that I knew needed to be on the record. It just needs to have this thing. So I rented a tambora from an English guy I met, and I borrowed a theremin from somebody.
So big pink glasses?
And Yeah, that the tambora was on
Yeah.
big pink glasses, was
Right.
also on funky flying chair.
Right.
And then I grabbed that theremin to use on a couple of tracks, to use
Right.
on Funky Flying, and also on the
Right.
last track, Stuck in a Hole.
Right. That's right.
No, I'm sorry. It wasn't on Stuck in a Hole. It was on You Must Be Wondering.
Yeah, You Must Be Wondering. Right. Right at the beginning.
So while all that stuff was great fun, it was very challenging to make it sound right. Can I even do this? Is this even going to work?
Right. Pressure. Right. Just additional pressure and just more challenge. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. So
The toughest thing for me was just getting the sounds.
Yeah.
I think it's what every recording artist goes through. If you don't have the right snare sound, then the rest of the track is going to be uninspiring and disappointing. I can only imagine like Bruce Springsteen trying to record Darkness on the Edge of Town. And when you're someone like him, how are you going to be in those headphones and deliver that inspired vocal performance if what you're hearing in your cans is subpar?
Right.
If there's like a lame ass snare that's coming at you and like, oh, I hate this sound, and it's coming at me 2 or 3 times a second. So I made sure that whatever I was going to be hearing was going to be acceptable.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, did you have time constraints and money constraints that said everything will be acceptable, I got 20 minutes per song, and so acceptable's relative? Or did you have the luxury of some time and space to deal with it?
Oh, yeah, because I was living and working in Austin, but I was driving down to Houston on my days off, trying to squeeze in as much studio time as possible.
Right.
And sometimes I didn't get the sounds I wanted.
Yeah.
So I'd have to address those at a later time, either re-record them when I could or try to fix it in the mix. So it was a combination of both.
Were you
that
satisfied when you
yielded the
finished them?
product.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Darren. I had to cut out there, so yielded the finished product. I'm sorry. Were you satisfied with the release after you released it, the sound? Or did you say, I wish I could have had more time to fix that or change that? Or were you happy?
I think every artist second guesses the work after it's out. But at some point, you just have to let go. I think John Lennon said, there's not one Beatles track that I wouldn't re-record, including Strawberry Fields, especially Strawberry Fields.
Yeah, right. Well, there's a history to that, right? So, yeah, I mean, that's interesting. And I just wondered for you, because you're alone, right? Like, so the challenge was, it could have been, I wish I had a dog in the recording room with me, or a girlfriend or a wife, or, it could have been a number of variables in addition to the music, because you did it all alone, right? So that's the weird part, is like, I wish I'd have had more people there. There's other externalities that may have entered the thought process, as opposed to, the 40th instrument I was playing in that song is sort of lame. And at that point you sort of say, well, I did it as much as I could. It was just a lot of time, right? At some point you stop painting the Sistine Chapel, right? You say, it's done. It's done now. No
Exactly.
seller's remorse at the end were like glaring issues that you'd change. This is sort of a setup question, Darren. So I'm gonna. It's sort of a setup.
There might have been a track or two where maybe I laid down one guitar track too many, and maybe I should have just left that muted in the mix. But that's really just nitpicking. A lot of times I'm just listening to my performance, and particularly my vocal delivery. Ultimately, that's what people are going to walk away with.
Yeah.
And you want people to believe you when you're singing.
Yeah, that's for sure.
It's like, does this person mean it? Is this coming from this person's heart? It doesn't matter if it's exactly on pitch or not.
Yeah.
Is it coming from a place in his soul that's authentic?
Yeah, that's such a good point.
That's what I was hoping for.
Yeah, and I think maybe I get a leg up here because I know a little bit about you and have spent some time with you. But I it's funny because I have sort of 3 categories of songs as I listened to this week, which were the classic songs for me of yours, which is the big rockers, and the ones I like. She's Better Than Me, Don't Look at Me, Down, Metro B, Boxing Day, The Road Ahead. Rock songs, I don't know how you'd call them, what you'd call them if you didn't call them that. It's so progressive or pop, I don't know. But there's a series of things that I thought I would call them this until you tell me I'm an idiot, sort of fantasy songs that bring in either yours and my infatuation with cartoons and Mad magazines. So the Underdog, Clutch Cargo, and then space referencey type songs. So you're going to have Funky Flying Chair, Sermon on Mars, Big Pink Glasses, Ginger Granite, Blackberry Plain. There's a whole series of songs that there's no way we know what you're talking about for a lot of it. There's illusion, there's illusional, there's sort of interaction between characters. There's probably real family members, probably real relationships, but it's, it's symbolic enough that we sort of have to go for the color ride as opposed to this is a heartbroken song or a rock and roll song. Even though you could say She's Better Than Me is one versus the other, there's this series of songs that paint very visual pictures and leave the listener trying to figure out the meaning on some of that. Is that a fair assessment that you sort of have this bucket of more symbolic songs or songs that are a little harder for the listener to figure out? Woke up, got out of bed,
yeah.
right?
I mean, some of those images are just mental Polaroids.
Right.
There are vivid memories that I have as a kid of sitting in front of the TV watching Clutch Cargo.
Right.
And I think I had like an ingrown toenail or something. My toe was really sore, and my mom would just sit me down with a big old bucket of water and Epsom salt.
Yeah,
and it was like, ow. And so I'm just going to illustrate that as best I can and make it interesting.
Right.
I remember reading a book about William Shatner, and at some point in his career being so down and out, he had no home. He had this, what was one of those silver Airstream trailers.
Uh-huh.
He was smaller than that. He had this little dome, this little sort of chrome dome, and he would set it up in front of people's houses, like in their front yards. And kids would come around. It's like, are you from outer space?
Right.
And he would go, yes, I'm Captain Kirk.
Play the
So
drums.
that made it into a song.
Yeah. And so you can piece that together and say, okay, obviously you're not trying to hide Captain Kirk reference there or William Shatner, right? Or so you get that, and it's just, and then I think that line has one of your better lines is, each time he makes his mind up right behind his ear is the crippling feeling of loneliness and fear, something like that. That's a different song. But it's funny, so that middle bucket of songs still is nonetheless, when you're in there listening to them, and Blackberry Pain and Ginger Granite are very good examples. Very nice songs, very nice melodies, a different lyric challenge. And then there's this sort of third category of the deeper songs, ones that you can tell were maybe ones that you had, I don't want to say emotional struggles, but I want to say these were deeper from the heart, right? They're relationship songs, or they're, clearly there's something being said in them. And so I know it's an artificial designation for me to make, but I did that so much with Beatles songs growing up, right? I mean, I had my categories. So Rocky Raccoon fell in a category, right? Martha, My Dear fell in a category, right? There was just, over time you had, Helter Skelter fell into a category of Beatles songs, and they, I siloed them maybe because that's how I organized my thoughts. But it was very interesting as I thought, I'm going to talk to someone about their catalog. How am I going to approach it? I could just take shots and talk about songs and just listen to it and put no thought into sequencing them. But it's the first time I ever tried to bucket your songs into sort of groupings like I do the Beatles, right? And then, knowing where my favorites are. My favorites all fell in this classic section, so I guess I cheated on how I did it. But I kept asking myself on the first one, I thought, I wonder which one was where he thought he was drumming best in the first album. Like, what was your best drum song? Like, what was the most creative, or when did you drum best, or when were you on the click all front to end, you crushed it, What was your thoughts on drumming? I'd be curious what you come up with on that.
That's a really good question. With all the times that I've listened to Solitarium, there aren't too many instances where I sit there and go, wow, I'm really great on this track, or oh, I'm just terrible on this one. But I was pretty satisfied with all of the drum performances. I always thought that whenever I'm playing on my own stuff, I try to play what is appropriate for the music.
Yeah.
And I try not to overplay in the same way that I might be tempted to do live when I'm in the moment and feeling spontaneous. You know, sometimes it works in the studio and sometimes it doesn't. So there were a few times where I played it safe. But I think Down is one of my favorite drum performances.
Yeah, me too.
I like the way it moves. I like the way it feels.
And it's
a couple of things I did with cymbals
that tell me about it.
Makes me feel good.
What was? I'd be curious because it has a 3 verses if I'm not mistaken. So it's not a long song, but it's a longer song, and so there was possibility to do something overly tricky or tropish or in one of those extra verses if you say that no song should have more than 2, and 2 choruses or whatever, but there's a third verse in that song, and I thought, there's some restraint in that, just like there is in the bridge in Boxing Day with your drumming, where I thought he could have gone mental in the Boxing Day middle and completely destroyed sort of the whole feeling of this song, and I thought, very good chance you considered that or maybe not. And so this is sort of what I think about when I'm sitting like, I wonder how easy that was for a natural born drummer to not just go berserko in Boxing Day. So, but let's go back to Down. So what did you do on the cymbals that you were happy with or that I could listen to as a non-drummer and hear it now? Because I haven't distinguished the cymbal action in that song.
Oh, there's just a couple of little subtle things
Right.
that I picked up from other drummers. And it's like, I hope I get a chance to effectively and authentically steal that and put it on my own record.
Yeah.
And have no one notice. So just those, it's
notice.
really more for you to enjoy.
All right.
And say, wow, that feels really good, than it does to me.
Well, I've been doing it for 20 years, enjoying it, so now I get to ask questions about the subtleties. All right, but very political answer. There you go.
Since you asked, though, I also like my drumming on Prison Break.
Yeah.
And I like it a lot on She's Better Than Me.
Yeah.
I thought those were a couple of tracks that were pretty spontaneous and inspired. She's Better Than Me was the only song that I didn't demo first.
That's right. I remember you telling me that.
That was something that Lars and I just built.
Yeah, so you're talking about your producer at the time, Lars, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. That's interesting. I mean, and you mentioned that to me, and maybe I recall that, so that's not the surprise, but I was so happy when I got the album. I was like, hey, Darren, I haven't heard this one before. It's awesome. You're like, yeah, that was the last one in. So that was a good surprise for me. So Solitarium, so all Darren all the time. No favorites on his part, likes how it came out. And pretty quickly after, in relative terms, you come up with Haunted Gardenia's second album. Do these albums sound different to you? Does the 2-year hiatus plus 6 years from when you started doing demos and then a bunch of recording with other people, was that enough time for you to see and hear and deploy new recording techniques? And do you hear a difference between album 1 and album 2, just from an engineering or sound point of view?
Oh, sure. There were 2 completely different recording formats we were using. Solitarium was all done on tape. It was done between digital tape for recording and audio tape or analog tape for mixing. And there's very little editing that you can do in that kind of stuff. There's a lot of things that you just can't fix. Haunted Gardenia's was all done on Pro Tools, so we had the luxury of being able to edit and do a lot of post-recording effects. And it was fun, but you also had to be disciplined.
Yeah, right. It's interesting because I recall you saying to me, I think it was to the opening of Prison Break, which for those who are listening is on the Solitarium album, I believe, that there's an intro where I would guess, if I were guessing, you were trying to pay homage to the Beatles with some reverse tape recording. right in the beginning. Okay, so things like that, I imagine, when you get to Pro Tools, have a whole different spin on them. You probably have less flexibility and more flexibility, depending on what you consider flexibility being if you're in the Pro Tools world. But when you run into tape, that exercise is sort of binary, right? I mean, if you're going to flip the recorder around and put backwards tape playing on, I guess it probably is better suited for a tape environment, right? I'm just guessing here, but things like that.
You could do it in both.
Yeah.
You could do it in Pro Tools, and so when we were doing Solitarium, it was kind of a tricky process because I think that the backwards stuff at the beginning of Prison Break, that was all done post. I think that was done in the mastering process, something like that. I can't really remember.
Interesting.
But I remember having to take a soloed recording of a guitar track, record that over to a cassette, flip that around.
Right.
You know, real old school
Right.
techniques that we were using.
Right.
But sometimes there was a guitar melody that I would write, and I would say, I really want to hear this melody, but I hear the pattern being backwards.
Yeah.
So what I'd have to do is learn the guitar solo backwards and find this particular spot on the rhythm track where I could record it. And I had to practice it and get it like that so that when you turn the tape over and play it back, it gets exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, that isn't lost on me, but it's not clear to me, and it's only through discussion that I understand that. But I think, I guess what I'm trying to show is there's a lot of complexity to these albums if you listen to them as much as I do, and even if you don't, even if you just pick them up. So if you were to order Solitarium or Haunted Gardenias today, I mean, the real sort of pleasure in listening to that first album is the time when it was recorded and the effort that was put in on a tape-to-tape setup. I'm not saying it's different or better or worse than Haunted Gardenias, but to me, there's an audio distinction that makes it fun to listen to still for me today. So let's move on to the next album. So, I mean, at this point, all music all the time, you're recording, and Boxing Day seems to be the magnum opus of the second album. I think people, if I believe your online discussions, that seems to be well regarded by a lot more people more often, and so that seems to be the centerpiece of the next album. But how did you go about getting ready for that? Did you go through the same demo process? Were you writing while you were playing with other bands and teaching, or did you write in a big block, or did everything change as you got to album 2?
It was a little bit more compressed, I think. Because the songs that were written for Haunted Gardenias were written in a shorter period of time. And theme-wise, Haunted Gardenias is a darker record.
For sure.
Because I had gone through some dark stuff personally. And there were some songs that were based entirely on that. Yeah. Either the emotion from it or... Again, I'm a big fan of doing mental Polaroids. And so there are a few of those that really don't mean anything to anyone else but to me.
Yeah.
But just as a source of imagery in a song that's available to everyone, it really works.
Yeah.
So there were a couple of things that were just based on places that I've been. Yeah. Metro B was entirely about hanging out in Rome.
Yeah.
And I thought that would be a great way to kick the record off because it's fun and it's fast, and the lyrics have this Italian thing, and it's I just thought it was a fun and unique way to sing rock and roll.
Yeah. It's a great song.
And
I love it. It's a great song.
So there were other songs that just showed up out of nowhere. Yeah. Ginger Granite, for example, is a song about paralysis and regret. People looking back over their lives and saying, gosh, I wish I had done more. I wished I'd taken more chances. I wished I traveled more. And so it's written from a perspective of a person that doesn't want to be sitting on his deathbed and regretting not having done more with their lives.
Yeah, I mean, that has two excellent lines in it, Ginger Granite. I mean, can't you see I'm shaking? You know, that's the each time he makes his mind up from behind his ear. Those are just devastating lines when you hear them because it's such a pretty song. You're like, oh, jeez, okay. You know, it's this, you know, I don't know, this blend or this mix, and it catches you off guard. And I always sort of wait for that line because it's such an anachronism with the prettiness of the song, but it really is a song. It's in that, like you said, it's in that, obviously we understand it's a personal song. It falls in that third category, right? And I remember, and then we've talked, and I'm not trying to pull stuff out about what we talked about in that time period, and I remember some of the complexity of that time period for you. And it's interesting how in such a short space, even the rocking songs, you know, they do stand out. Metro B is one that I listen. It's my travel song. When I have long trips to do, I love playing Metro B when I land in the new airport, because and Boxing Day sometimes. But Metro B is a classic traveler song. If you get your feet moving in an airport and you're getting out, it's like, okay, let's go, right? Get the Metro, get the car, the limo, whatever you're taking. But great travel song. You know, and then Boxing Day obviously it could also be a travel song as well, but it's a profoundly deep song. You know, and I think the question is, I Belong With You. You know, I've always wondered if it was a love song, or if it was I Belong With Music, or I Belong With the Beatles in the UK, or if I Belong With My Family. You know, there's a lot of interpretation if you know Darin, and if there's not, there's even a lot of interpretation, because it's a long, deep song with a long narrative. And so I'm not saying it culminates there, you know, but you know, I Belong With You, I think, is a line in there, right? Or maybe do I have the wrong song?
Mm-hmm.
But I think, you know, there is some question about...
it's definitely one of the main hooks in the tune.
Yeah.
And Boxing Day is a unique song in my catalog. It's one of the first ones that actually started on a piano. And
right.
I had been sitting around with my grandmother's old spinet piano, and some of those little lines started showing up, and then I seem to remember transferring that over to the guitar. And I just the other day, I was going back through my old book of scraps and lyrics.
Nice.
And just tons and tons of things that I was scribbling down, because I didn't have a song yet. And I may have had a hook. You know? Right. But I also remember at some point walking along the shores of Lake Travis, just looking at rocks.
That's in Austin
and
area. Yeah.
That's a real zen for me sometimes. And I can get really, really focused, and things can kind of show up at that point. And then at that point, the song starts to make sense. And then I think, okay, well, there's a hook in place here, and there's a feeling in place here. Now, what can I use to help illustrate that? So I recall the time when I was in Paris, and I had just gotten back from London, and I was having an amazing time in London. I was hanging out with Nick Lowe and touring the whole city and seeing these crazy sights. Maybe we'd go by Mick Jagger's house, or here's the place where Mark Bolan's car crash happened. Anyway, I was having such a wonderful time and just feeling on top of the world, and then went back to Paris. And for some reason, just felt really gloomy. Yeah. And I thought, well, I'm not where I belong. I'm not grounded here. I really belong over there on the other side of the English Channel.
Right.
And so I just used that to help illustrate the song.
And that's clearly the meaning I took away from it. I mean, just reading through it. So it's interesting, because you could right, there's a multiple interpretation in that line, and it could be the ultimate love song, but it's also you explained it that way. So that's interesting as a fan and as a listener to hear that. I'm maybe stalling a little bit here to try and put it in context in my head, but it's interesting. So I do get it, right? You took a short trip, and it was like going 1,000 miles, right? Like, whoa, wait, now I'm over here. I want to go back, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, interesting.
But the ultimate message from that song is, I belong with you.
Right.
It's about being with the people you belong with the person that you love, and respecting the work that you had to go through and the things that you had to suffer in order to get to that moment. And at that point, you just don't want there to be any time. You want to have this moment where you're just still, swan diving into Jello.
Yeah. Yeah. All thoughts are on my green and red holiday season. I guess, yeah, it's Boxing Day. Yeah, I mean, it's very tight. I mean, it's just it's a great song. And so same types of questions. Any unique writing discoveries during that time period, or any high profile moments for you on either the drums or other instruments? I tried to put big D's next to the song that I thought you would say, these are big drum songs. And I think Masterpiece, I thought, I bet you he liked drumming that song on that album. And then I thought The Heavens, I think The Heavens Cried for You. I can't imagine that was an easy song to play and work through and do the work in that song, because I think it's an emotional song. I'd guess it was one for you, but the orchestration and the drumming of that I would think you were happier with than other songs, or guessing. So either those two songs, Masterpiece or The Heavens?
Yeah. The genesis of all those recordings is really unique compared to what the process was on Solitarium. Some of these songs I was actually performing live before I had demoed any of them. I just showed them to my backing band at that time, and we just got them up on stage. And there was a period where I was touring around without a backing band.
Yeah.
And so I was using these backing tracks. So I was touring around as like a 3-piece combo with just me on electric guitar and pre-recorded drums and bass.
Nice.
And I had to go in and decide what the drums were going to be, and decide what the bass was going to be. And I had a tight little, maybe 20 to 30 minute set. So I used that. Those were really the demos. So I used that as the template for actually going into the studio to record the album. But there was a lot of stuff that I didn't do live, that I didn't even demo. I just went in and said, how are we going to do this?
Yeah. I remember passing through town when you were playing with your band, and this was about to come out. And I saw you. I forget what street it was on in Austin. I was there with my friend Stuart. You may not remember that. I got a chance to catch you right in the middle of this, and then the album came out, and then I remember hearing some of the songs. So I understand what you're describing. So, yeah, very different process, right? You're doing a million things at once, probably then.
There were a couple of songs that were actually finished off in the studio.
Yeah.
Turning Into You was one of those.
I can see that.
The last song on the album, 0G. And I even think, to some extent, Boxing Day, I think there were some lyrics that were not finished. And I just had to go, I've got to get the record finished. And when you're under the gun, sometimes that can be an inspiring moment. Stuff can come to you that may not come to you if you're not under pressure.
That's an interesting comment.
So I love that kind of spontaneity.
That's an interesting comment. I mean, the way you set that up for me, and I'm sorry I keep interrupting you, because I want to tell you why you wrote your music for you, but that's not the goal of this thing. I mean, I sit and I think, like, as a listener, 0G, hearing that, it falls in that fantasy category of song I wrote that's upbeat and bouncy and has some excitement and has the Nassau piece of you and has the limitless sky theory or fantasy world, which is hopefully reality as well. It changes the end of the album. I mean, it really, I thought, okay, whatever else was going on up above, if 0G is the last song, there's hope. Like, we've come out of whatever the rest of it was, right? You know what I mean? I thought,
you take this journey full of fear and tears,
and now we're floating.
Self-reflection and memories and regret and apologies, and then all of a sudden you have this song that's completely about being a womanizer in outer space.
Right, just some bizarre, but a very, very bouncy and happy womanizer, from how I gather. And I'm not making fun of womanizing, but it's just an interesting song. in that very complex construction, which is the rest of the album.
Just so you know, it's consensual.
All right, of course.
It's not forcing myself on a woman out in a spaceship where there's no one else.
Right. So hopefully for people who are listening, they've heard, this genesis from professional developing skills in a broad set, deploying, doing the Beatles Fab Forgeries, and then moving quickly into their own batch of material, which led to the next round of material that's even produced and played at a even higher level than the first album, and captured in a way that takes advantage of the maturity of the industry at that time, which is over to Pro Tools. And so you get sonic boosts as well as playing and versatility, and then virtuosity as well. So it's all moving. And I think watching you at that point play Boxing Day live was, okay, this guy's got his live show together too. So everything was maturing at once. So that was very cool to see. Then my sort of next interaction with you is Lennon the Musical. And so for those of you who weren't around for this or don't know or don't follow stuff, and Beatles stuff is possibly deeply as I do or Darin does, which is extreme, you auditioned for and were a participant in a musical on Broadway called Lennon, and I got to see that, and that was a musical obviously about John Lennon. And it had, it's a musical, so it's singing parts, right? So it was a story. And I got you to see that. That one I was like, what are you talking about? Like, what? And you described it earlier that you had this tape you sent to someone and they heard it and said, you got to come up to New York and talk to us, right? We need to see what's going on here. Anything you want to talk about from that time period about that? Sort of give us some context for that?
Let's see. At that time, I wasn't focused very much on my own original music career. I was recording a lot. I was writing a lot of commercial stuff. And I was also a father by that time.
Right.
I had a 2.5-year-old son named Dexter, who's now in college.
Yeah.
And I also had this little band called K-Tel Hit Machine.
Right.
That was made up of a bunch of other artists like me. They'd all been in the original music scene, or all at various stages, either between albums or between tours. And we were all getting together and just having fun geeking out on 70s stuff. So we were playing a lot then as well. And it was when we were coming back from this gig that we had just done. And I ran into a guy on the street, a friend of mine, who happened to be the only guy in Austin that knew that there was a John Lennon musical being developed for Broadway. And he mentioned it to me in passing.
Yeah.
And I said, I want to do that. I can do that.
Yeah.
And I said, go home right now, go to my website and download the Fab Forgeries. And so he did. And he immediately sent those over to Don Scardino, the creator of the show, who then called me and sent me a script.
Yeah.
So that was one of those rare moments in life where everything just kind of clicks, and all those little balls just fall into place. And you start thinking to yourself, I'm about to go on an adventure here. I don't know what's going to happen, but something cool is going to come out of this. So,
and you go up
by the
and
time
audition,
we did,
right?
What's that?
You going to New York to audition?
I went to New York. I auditioned for Don and the producers, and then I went back a couple of months later to audition for the entire production team, including Yoko Ono, who was front and center. My hands have never shaken so much in my life. And it was also, I decided that I was going to make my debut as a piano player.
Oh, Christ.
During that audition.
Imagine.
It was okay.
What was the piano?
But fast forward, I was selected as a swing.
Yeah.
So they got much more experienced Broadway veterans to anchor the musical. And I just kind of sat back for the first few months and observed and wrote and practiced and honed my own skills.
Yeah.
So that by the time one of them called out, I was ready.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and
I ended up doing 21 shows
yeah.
at the Broadhurst Theater on 44th Street.
Yeah, so I was I forget where I was living at that point, maybe Miami or maybe California, but I remember coming into town and seeing that, and we went, I don't think you could sit with me, or there was something, but saw the show, and it was, I remember that story, and it was interesting. I mean, the timing was profound, right? And so I go to listen a while back and hear Christmas and Beyond, and I remember the singing at that Lennon the Musical is a different type of Broadway singing, and the voice you have in the recording of Christmas and Beyond makes me think about, this was the singing in that song, because you're obviously singing with a very highly trained duet with a woman whose voice seems to be a fairly superior voice. Not superior
Rona
to you.
Figueroa,
Right,
yeah, very talented girl.
Right, and it seemed like you were singing very different than you do on your rock songs or even some of your ballads. And I thought, oh, this has a whole different feel to it, this thing. And it starts to bring me to some of the other things we're going to talk about, which are the movies that I've watched this week for the first time. There was this whole new thing. It was sort of, okay, singing, we know he can do Beatles, we know he can do this stuff. Christmas and Beyond, and then the musical, the way you sang there wasn't the way you sing on Metro B, right?
Right. There's actually another recording of that song that I did a year earlier that's me singing it more like me, as I had written it. But by the time I'd gone through the whole process and been around all these Broadway singers, and my vocal skills had increased a bit by then, and for this project, for the context of this project, I felt like it needed a different kind of vocal than I would instinctively apply to it, especially to lock in with someone like Rona. And we were doing it as just a contribution to this bigger compilation that other Broadway artists were doing. So in order to kind of fit into that niche, I changed my style a little bit.
Yeah, and it's interesting as I look at what you're putting out online now with your solo guitar playing, singing some falsetto pieces, there's some very high pieces, stuff that I'm not used to hearing you sing and arrange. It's interesting in the last 20 years, maybe 15, 10, expanding the things you put out, the vocal range. It just... Do you see that with musicians a lot? It's just an interesting observation to see you taking these new challenges, or maybe I just never saw them before, and it could well be that. And I didn't see the K-Tel Hit Machine. I think I saw Skyrockets once, or maybe I didn't. But, I know that, you sing a lot of eclectic material in there, and so there's a lot of challenges with the songs you're singing. And I think on your On the Roof, you pay homage to your namesake. With Beyond the Sea, there's some clever vocal ranges you're hitting that clearly are not a stretch for you, but are different places for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and by the way, K-Tel Hit Machine morphed into Skyrocket.
Right,
They're essentially the same band, just a name change.
Yeah.
But I think that there were skills that I forgot I had.
Yeah.
That I didn't really start employing until like Haunted Gardenias was the first time that I kind of reconnected with this falsetto thing that I hadn't done since I was a kid. When I was 14, I was singing first soprano in choirs.
Right.
And eventually it occurs to me that what's wrong with taking that stuff? What's wrong with finding a song that I can apply that to? But I only wanted to do if it was authentic. I didn't want to do it just for the sake of doing it.
Right.
So sometimes you have to wait for the song to show up. Sometimes they don't come around automatically, and you can't force them. You just have to wait for the music to arrive.
Yes. So if you're fans of Darin's, it's interesting to listen to the On the Roof session, the other compilations you put together, because you really are stretching out there. But it's also, so we're moving away now from Lennon and then some of the other things you did around then, and we're not up to the White Album tour yet or the movies. But as you look at the live sessions you're doing, and you go back to Darin as a songwriter, and you see, the acoustic elemental pieces to a song like She's Better Than Me, you can see that devolution, bringing it back to how you wrote it. And so this many years later, listening to you play these acoustic is very interesting, because I know Retrograde, one of your songs titles that you didn't put out, I don't think. I think you had a vocoder on it or something, some voice box early. When you sort of devolve these or bring them back to how you're playing solo, it's COVID time, you're on the roof, you're playing them, so you're playing them with acoustic, probably like you wrote them. It's interesting how true to form they are, but how different they are. And then when you put this different vocal pattern you have on, it's really fun to listen to that August show from last year and hear your material, because you put a lot of the ones I wanted you to hear on there, right?
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and so I was like, oh, this is, and it sounds good. So obviously you're an audiophile, and you're not going to put out garbage recordings well, you're not going to put out a poorly recorded thing unless there's some other reason for doing it. But you paid attention to how that sounded. So it was interesting. I just wanted to pass that along to you as a thought. It was really interesting for me this week in particular to go back and look as I was trying to sort of think about the arc of your career and how it's moved forward. But this was really gratifying to see you sort of, you just even, and recording it up close enough to see some of the complexities of the chord changes you use throughout some of the stuff that you're doing.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that is another sort of small miracle that came out of last year's COVID nightmare, is that everything that you see up on those rooftop recordings is unedited, and as it was performed. No question. So some of it's completely spontaneous. Some of it was stuff a song I'd planned to do, but maybe the way I performed it wasn't exactly as how I had planned it. So there's a lot of improvisation in there, but it's an exercise in no judgment. You're completely live. Anything can happen, but it's just you and a guitar. Just trust yourself. Trust your ability to communicate.
Yeah, that's what I like.
Trust your ability to sing. And don't be too ashamed if something goes wrong.
Well, and there was one, I mean, maybe in the hour I noticed a couple of things that maybe you were struggling to find, and I noticed you never really looked down at your hands and you're playing, and I thought that was remarkable in and of itself, because you're on a rooftop, and I thought, I wonder how comfortable he actually is sitting up there. But it's interesting, and I give you a lot of credit because it sounds great, and for people who like listening to you, it was a lot of fun to look at. And so I'd say, go back and sit down and leave an hour to watch that one. Don't just watch 2 minutes in, because there's some big payoffs in there. One thing I couldn't identify was the Horseshoe Bay, if that was your song or not. I just couldn't.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was out of the ordinary, but it did revert to sort of your geographic. You have some other markers in the past where you run through the geography a little bit. I would say Boxing Day or Metro B. And so I thought I saw some commonality, but I started to see this with Wasting Our Time, Horseshoe Bay, Things We Lost in the Fire. You?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. These are departures for fans of Darin, and so they're not released on an album or out there in a old school fashion that would let you put them on the shelf next to your first releases. So there's new stuff out there. And I think this brings us to the next topic is, jump forward a couple of years. You were a star and a central character in 2 recently released movies. And I watched them both this week, My Ranger and Empty Nester's Handbook. And so you can give us a little context on those and how long they took to make or other facts. And I'm going to check with Frank. Are we doing okay on batteries right now? We good on batteries?
Yes.
We have a weird system, so we actually have to change stuff. There's Franco.
Hey, Frank.
Hey.
All right, two mics. All right, good. All right, kill one of those mics there for me, thanks. So good. So jumping ahead. So we're skipping some years, and I think you'll forgive me for that, even though there's a lot of bonus material in there, because I do want to go back and talk about the touring you were doing. But you have a song or two, and I think you wrote a short little ditty for the main character that was awesome, and hopefully you'll complete that song right up front. But I'm gonna, because I live in a subtitle country, because I live in Thailand, and a lot of the stuff I watch has subtitles that come up. I'll bet you didn't know this, that in My Ranger, when they play Blackberry Plain in the song, one of your songs, that when you pull the subtitles up, it says Lacey's theme.
Lacey's theme.
So just for fans of Darin, see, I'm doing to you what you would do to the Beatles, right? No, that's not what you play there. If you watch the subtitles to your own movies, which I have to here for a reason I won't explain and is ridiculous. Lacey's theme. So you might want to go check that out. It was an interesting little fact that people may be calling, oh, Darin, I love that song, Lacey's theme. Because it's... And so I assume one of the characters at that moment in the movie was Lacey.
Wow.
Or not.
Is there?
I don't know.
No.
Right, so...
But now I have to go write a song called Lacey's theme, clearly.
And then play Blackberry Plain. Let's see.
I think I may have already written it. I just think I'm just going to change the lyric. Now it's Lacey.
Lacey's theme.
It's going to be on the next album.
That'll be a Jeopardy question. Aaron Rodgers will ask us after he retires and does Jeopardy. Darin Murphy for 1,000. In what movie did Darin write Lacey's theme? There you go. So you star in a movie and you have music in the movie. And I want to get to the big song, Wasting Our Time, and I want to try and connect some dots here, and I want to try and stump the guest. But could you talk to me about what in the hell is going on here that you got involved in this? I knew you were doing acting. I knew Lennon obviously, altered the arc or imbued the arc or, made you think about stage stuff in a different context. And I know we talked about that, so it wasn't that radical a departure when we talked about it. But this... and I think you had some other efforts. I saw Your First Day in Hell and some other things that you'd done and with some acting chops in it. But these were featured roles, and you were the main character, and awards were given out and things like that. So there were a lot of people involved in this, so this was a serious effort, and it was fun to watch this week. So help me understand that, or help the Darin Murphy fans understand what that was all about.
Very quickly. After a couple of years after I got back from New York, I did start taking acting classes again. And I got representation, and I do what all the actors do in town, auditioning and voiceover, and occasionally you get a project, maybe a web series, building your resume and stuff like that. And at the same time, there's this guy named David Reyes, whom I knew through the music scene. And he, like you, has been an avid supporter of mine for a long time, since Solitarium came out. And he's also just a big advocate of Austin music. Loves Bob Schneider. He loves Cotton Mather. He loves my stuff. So he had used some of my music in his first feature film that he made about 6 years ago. And then he came to me with a script and said, hey, I've got a character. His name is Ben, and he's a father of this kid that's the central character in this film. And I was sort of thinking about you when I wrote the character, and would you be interested in reading for it?
Interesting.
And I said, sure. I don't know if he even knew that I was an actor on the scene at that time. I think that's just coincidence.
Right.
But I read it. I taped an audition. He cast me in it, and we had a great time making it. And about a year later, he came to me and said, that was such a great experience telling that story that I've taken your character and your spouse, and the next movie is going to be about you guys.
Oh.
And so if you would agree to do this movie, you'd be the lead. And how do you say no to that?
Right.
He said, read the script first, and if you like it, then we'll do it. So I read it, I loved it, and we got together and went for it. And he also cast Robert Harrison from Cotton Mather as my best friend.
Right, and the irony is not lost that it could well be a best friend or a very good friend. So it's funny to think the reality reflecting the movie and the movie reflecting reality on some level. So we could start picking apart this to find out what more parts were real. There was obviously a fastidiousness about your CD collection when you were trying to figure out whether to yell at your son or not about how he was messing your CDs up on the bed, which probably stems back to some reality. A massive T-shirt collection in the closet could possibly be a real reflection. Maybe not. I don't know. But
that was all the mind of David Reyes.
Okay. But
yeah,
it's the story, the first one. So of the two, there's sequentially My Ranger, I guess, is the story about this son growing up and your family, your son in the movie. And I'm always intrigued when writers try to write about inanimate objects or animate objects and personify them. So My Ranger takes on a special power in the movie over time, and I think the boys in the movie refer to as Ranger power. And so I'm a sucker for anything that tries to imbue animals or cars and buildings with human powers or sort of spiritual powers. So I thought that was a funny twist as the Ranger itself. But some funny sequences in there, but a lot of Austin referencing in there, right? So I think you had on Skyrocket's T-shirt, if I'm remembering the sequences right. So that was
yes. In the final scene of My Ranger, I am wearing a Skyrocket T-shirt.
Okay. So if you watch that, it's interesting. You gotta keep your eyes on the screen. And for someone who lives over in Asia, in Bangkok, and is pining for going back home, it was doubly rewarding to sort of watch and have the Austin references thrown out. So I think you and the director were serving the area well by having those embedded references. And that carried on into the Empty Nester's Handbook, which is the sequence after your son who drove the car in the first sequence, the first movie, goes off to college.
That's right.
And I thought it was interesting timing wise because it lines up, right? So, obviously he understood or came to understand the parallels, right, between your actual life and this movie's subtext, the Empty Nesters.
Yeah,
right?
this is true. My son was just wrapping up his junior year in high school at that moment. But I took it as a sneak preview of what my life was going to be like just a couple of years down the road. But because I was so grateful for the opportunity, and I really felt like I owed David Reyes everything I had, like any skill that I had that I could offer to tell his story. It's his story. It's based on the wife of him. Did I say wife or life? It's based on him and his wife, and
right.
a lot of their real life elements were
right.
thrown into the script.
Yeah.
And so I said, all right, I'm going to really pull out all the stops and use all of my training and anything that I have to offer to make this the best film possible. So when he came to me at some point after we had finished shooting and said, hey, I've got this sequence, but I also need a song that's going to kind of tie up the whole film. Do you know of anything?
Yeah.
And I said, well, I've got a song that I've never recorded. I've only demoed it at home, but I think it might work. And so I sent it to him. It's a song called Wasting Our Time, which I'd written years before. And he listened to it and said, oh my God, this is perfect.
Yeah.
He said, I'll use it. I said, okay, but you have to let me go into the studio and record it properly.
Yeah.
Properly, because that's just a home demo. It's not releasable.
Right.
So when I went in to record it, I said, well, this is very much an Austin movie. This very much needs to have an indigenous vibe to it. So I took the opportunity to work with a lot of people that really, I thought, captured that vibe. And there were people that I had forged relationships. Damn this delay.
I got you up early.
I had forged relationships with these musicians over the years.
Yeah.
And I'd always wanted to work with them. People like Chris Searles and Scrappy Judd Newcomb and David Rice and Bruce Hughes, which have all been hometown heroes in this town for a long time, and very few people really know their names. But I used them, and I used my sister Trish, and it ended up being a nice recording that I was really proud of, and I thought it captured the mood and the spirit of the film, and particularly these two characters, Ben and Sarah, perfectly.
Yeah, I mean it's a beautiful. It sounds very nice, and it sounded nice on the soundtrack. And I got one of those ridiculous TVs that you can lose your hearing from if you turn it up loud. So I had it up pretty loud when I heard it, and I replayed it. I thought, well, this is good. And I'd heard the song on the internet as well, but it was interesting. I mean, so it's very, very telling to me to hear that and to watch some of the more uncomfortable scenes in the movie, your dancing sequence, which I know there's a significant amount of earnestness to it. There's one line I wrote down when I was watching it, where you say to your wife in the movie, who's not your wife in actual life, and I thought it was a very good piece of acting. It was a short snippet out of a larger uncomfortable sequence where you're trying to dance with her and she's a better dancer than you, and you're maybe drunk or maybe not, and I don't think that matters for the purposes of the scene, but you just say, why is this so hard? And it was just a very funny moment because you just are, by any measure, you're dancing like a very unskilled dancer. We'll just put it that way. And you say, why is this so hard? And it was just a very funny moment. I laughed out loud watching that, and I thought, okay, this is just going to get unbearable here as he does this. And the sequence was truly grueling to watch as a friend of Darin's, but I thought as someone watching this, it was a very good piece, not of slapstick, but of like when you're drinking later and you're drunk and you say, I'm going to try and dance again because I was horrible with my wife, and this is the central metaphor to this part of the movie is like, we're not falling apart that badly. I got to go try this. It's a very funny sequence, and I think I emailed you about it or lined you about it and said, funny sequence, and you said unrehearsed or live rehearsed. It was very, as a viewer, it was very uncomfortable to watch, and you made us feel uncomfortable, and I thought, what a good job, and what a good job that section is, because it's just, it really is one of the central themes of this, and if the title, Wasting Our Time, is a title that lines up with the movie, Empty Nester's Handbook. And this is obviously about not getting younger. It's about, a phase in life that belongs to people who've had kids, right? And so it's just, it was a very interesting setup. And so I'm going to ask you some questions about that in a second, but Prison Bake, why waste all this time? We won't look this good forever. 25 years ago. Right? Roll it forward. Glad to see us wasting our time for a change. And I thought, wow, the catalog is flipped, right? I mean, it's just, this is what happens. You have different appreciations. You have different sentiments. You mature. You don't mature. You have difficulties. You don't have difficulties. You have illnesses. You don't have illnesses. But in this little piece, you get album one, right? And then you roll forward, and you have an opposite lyric. Mm-hmm. And it's equally as valid now as it was then, and it's equally valid then as it was now. And so it's a very interesting construct. We've got to break
really
free from this prison.
I'd never put those two songs together side by side and compared them thematically or lyrically, but it does show the evolution of a relationship.
Right.
When you're two young lovers and you're first starting out and you're trying to shape the relationship and you're trying to kind of manipulate one another or just work out little kinks and then, years later, you're really getting the navigation process down, and you're also learning to let go of stuff.
Yeah.
You start prioritizing what's the most important. Well, the most important things to nurture in a relationship. What are the things that you leave behind? What are the things that you take seriously? What are the things that you just dismiss and brush off?
And in a career and in your musical commitment, right? And so you write this other song. So, we got to break free from this prison before the sun has risen. All right, so that's the urgency of the first song, right? So this can't go another day. To, glad to see us wasting our time. Days of wine and roses have passed. Some pretty epic statements. The rains, they showed up late and they paid us with interest. Just profound statements on the process of aging that aren't saying I'm getting old or that I'm moving through portholes, right? And it's just very, very subtle lyric writing to accompany a movie, right? So that's an even more ambitious goal. I think the pressure probably magnifies when you have the script that's influencing your word choices, right? Or maybe not, but is there and can now get tweaked or changed even though you've written it. And so just a very interesting thing. And so I would say if you're doing the Beatles analysis, right, you're checking the B-sides, you're playing them backwards, you're flipping the tape heads. If you do the prison break wasting time thing, it's a very interesting look at the evolution of an artist. And we don't always get these signals and signs and things to do. For those of us who follow music or love, analyzing it and looking at it, when artists put out a lot of material, it's easier to do. In this instance, you've done it, and you've done it with the movie. And so I thought, wow, this is very interesting, and it's such a pretty song. And Prison Break is not as pretty a song, right? I mean, it's, and so you wonder which is the truer depiction of Darin at that time. And I think they probably both are very accurate, right?
Yeah, I think so. Prison Break, I think I was listening to the Cardigans a lot, which is why you get those interesting chords and the kind of drum sound and the kind of playing. But it was really just writing a sexy song for the sake of writing a sexy song. And did little bits of wordplay and innuendo in there. And then Wasting Our Time was really another one of those mental Polaroids. Yeah. I remember just one particular month around the time I wrote that song being really, really rainy. And usually it happens like a month earlier, right? But it was like, oh, okay, well, here it is. It's finally here. Yeah. And boy, did it pay off. Yeah. Things are green and pretty. So that kind of sent all of these other little images floating up. Yeah.
Well done. I mean, to me, it's just interesting to watch, and I appreciate your coming on the show today to talk about this. And, this just may be of interest to fans, but, hopefully hearing a musician and actor and established American musician talk about this stuff can help people understand, the various ways of writing, and that, there's no set formula, and you go for it when you can go for it, and you maybe end up in Broadway on a stage, or you may end up in a movie, but the music is still here, and it's true, and it's been true for a long time. So this leads to
the lesson learned.
Yeah, hit me.
Is to just say yes.
Okay. All right. In this new culture, there you go. Just say yes. Frank, it used to be just say no. Now it's just say yes. So for using the Philippines, you missed the whole just say no thing. Now you get to just say yes. So say yes to everything, Franco. Darin Murphy says it's okay, and we'll tell the police when we have to explain ourselves. So you were on tour with one of my heroes, Todd Rundgren, Christopher Cross. Same tour?
Yeah. Todd Rundgren and Christopher Cross together. Yeah. And they brought along as their guests Mickey Dolenz and Joey Mullen from Badfinger.
Nice.
And Jason Scheff from Chicago.
Nice.
And the reason they all got together was to perform the Beatles' White Album live.
All right. So for those of you who don't know, I don't want to, you can hang up now, but all right. So this is an epic event. So, playing one of the Beatles albums on tour with guys who are contemporaries of theirs, but also who are phenomenal musicians. Period. End of story. Just what a thrill. We've seen these, we've seen Fish, Trey and Ozzy, or folks go up and play these epic things. We've seen Steely Dan do, their whole albums front to back, in various articulations. We I think U2 or Green Day did a tour where they played their own albums, but it's rare that you get to see a whole album concert like this. You know, it's not that it doesn't not happen. It happens quite frequently, but it's rare that folks get to see this, especially for something that, as a Beatles fan, is such a prominent thing with such skilled musicians. So very cool. And you put something online that shows you practicing harmonies with Christopher Cross, I think, on your Facebook, that shows the sort of probably insane amount of dedication to the craft that you have to duplicate epic records. Just even singing Christopher Cross's song Sailing with them, 3-part harmony, when you guys were doing it, sounded very nice, and it was a very cool thing for you to share with us. But it demonstrates sort of my thinking about how much work you had to get into to even get on that stage with these guys to do this thing, and then how much work you had to do that album right?
Yeah. And again, it was another one of those doors that were opened by the Fab Forgeries.
Yeah.
Because Christopher Cross was talking to a friend of his named Randy Miller, who was also a friend of mine. He produced my very first album with Trish back in the early 90s. And he had mentioned that they were trying to put this tour together and deciding who they were going to get to be in the backing band. And there was no drummer yet. And Randy Miller said, "I know the guy."
Nice.
So he
nice.
came to me and said, "All right, send me those Fab Forgeries and I'll send them over to Christopher." And then Christopher called me and said, "Yeah, we'd love to work with you on this." And they got this music director named Joey Curatolo, who was also a Beatles aficionado because he has been running the Rain show for the past 30 years.
Nice.
And he and I hit it off really well when we first got together. And we were all trying to come through to a consensus on how we were going to present the music, because we knew it couldn't be Beatlemania. It just had to be whatever all of these artists and their personalities brought to it. So I just considered my job to just be to hold everything down, to provide as many authentic sounds and drum licks and grooves as I could, and just pay attention to detail. So I would be the Beatles so that they could be themselves.
Yeah. Everybody's got something to hide except for me and my monkey. So cowbell or cymbal? I mean,
Ship spell.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Found
So
a sample
wait,
of that.
I sent you, and I'm gonna. If you deny this, I'm gonna say you're not a good. You don't have a good memory. So, I believe I sent you the Hal Leonard Beatles Complete. It's written by a Japanese guy. It's all of the songs written down of all the Beatles songs in one book, a white book. Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay.
The complete scores.
And you said, "I don't really need this." And I said, "I know you don't." But I said, it's fun to read through because it's someone crazy like you, Darin. And as you walk through, there are things where Paul doing scat bass. So it's boom, 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 boom. So in the song where he's not playing bass, he's singing it, it says scat bass. And that means it's Paul singing. Or Paul, Mother Nature's son. Right. Right. And so Paul playing... tapping his thigh, and so the beats are him hitting his leg on one song. And so you'll see these, and I thought, this is awesome for a fan just to have, because some guy sat and went through this and wrote it all down. Right? I mean, just how awesome is that? Just, and you got.
I'm really glad that you sent me that, because I have an enormous amount of respect for the team that put that together.
Right?
I've read too many Beatles score books that are in the wrong keys or have the wrong lyrics or wrong melody lines, and this one's pretty spot on and just about everywhere.
And it's just it doesn't apologize for the size of the font or for how you have to go through it, but it's just an enjoyable thing. So I'm thinking, here you are having to interpret songs that, geez, how many times have you listened to them before you get asked to do this? Hundreds, if not thousands, thousands, if not tens of thousands. I mean, who knows if it reaches 10,000. Mother Nature's Son, I've clearly listened to 10,000 times. I don't know, maybe. Just I'm sure it's a large number. It's not 100. It's not 500. It's not 1,000. It's there'll be some weeks, in particular if I'm trying to play it again, where I play it 30, 40 times, right? So you just rack up the numbers. It's like Despacito on Facebook, reach 5 billion views or something. It's just that actually happens. But what were the big Beatles discoveries you had? I'm sure you had to have had cathartic moments when you're on stage doing this live and like, hey, what were they? Were there any? Like,
that's a really good question. And it's one of those questions I wish I'd gotten in advance so I could think about it. But most of the time I was just so hyper focused on keeping everything locked down.
Yeah.
And it really is an assault on the senses, being up there with all of those different people and really having to focus hard on what everybody's doing and lock in with them. But I also had this whole laundry list of things I had to hit and buttons I had to push and little instruments that I had to change with every single song. So I didn't really have time to sit and reflect on musical discovery. It was just all about doing a job.
What song did your band members, or the band members, like to play the most? Was there a standout favorite that seemed to be the center of the White Album live performance?
I feel like we all got a huge kick out of playing Everybody's Got Something to Hide.
Yeah. How can't
that
you,
was just
right?
electric every time.
Yeah. It's funny because I saw McCartney play a couple times. I've seen him every decade. And I remember you did a version online recently of Getting Better. Yeah, he said in 2000 when I saw him in San Francisco or Oakland, he played that for the first time live. He said Getting Better. I don't think I've ever seen a live version of Everybody's Got Something to Hide except for Me and My Monkey. Right? I don't know of one by the Beatles that I've seen except way back when it was White Album material that was getting out, right? So I haven't seen anyone do that from that band later. Have you?
No.
Yeah. So awesome. I mean, just what a gem, right? What a great song. Glass Onion, another one.
Yeah, Glass Onion was fun.
Huh. Helter Skelter, obviously. I've seen Paul play that, and I remember Oakland saying, well, what? What's going on? It was loud. A rock song, right? One of the original rock songs.
You talking about Helter Skelter?
Yeah. Just blistering, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was fun to play.
Yeah, and just not to go off on a Paul McCartney tangent for too long, but one of the reasons I hate that guy is because he can get up there and sing Helter Skelter and sing Maybe I'm Amazed and sing My Love and sing Blackbird for 2.5 to 3 hours without taking a single sip of water. Come on.
That's just awesome.
That guy's not human.
No, not human. Yeah. I mean, and I mean, I remember Ann Wilson or Nancy Wilson making a comment similar, just saying, the guy's power was overwhelming. And I thought that's an interesting comment from them, just of the gazillion McCartney vocal comments. I love hearing them because I think what you just said is true. So how about for like the guitarist or the bass player? Were there any epic moments with them?
On the White Album tour?
Yeah, I love this song.
Oh, I can't say enough about Wayne Avers, who came to us through Mickey Dolenz.
Yeah.
He is Mickey's right arm. He's been touring with the Monkees for years and years and came with him to sort of be Mickey's musical director and handler and also be the guitar player in this group. And he's just such a consummate pro.
Yeah.
On stage and off stage, and such a talented player. And he just nailed everything.
Yeah.
And if he had something that he wasn't sure of, he'd either talk to the musical director or sometimes he talked to me.
Yeah. I imagine you're a source. So did you get to sing in the show?
I sang backup.
Yeah, what?
And there were 1 or 2 lines that I got a solo on.
Huh.
Most of the time it was, now she's hit the big time.
That was admirable right there, even with the hand thing. It was right on. Yeah. I mean, I was thinking, boy, I hope, but who sang Mother Nature's Son in that tour?
Christopher.
Nice. Shit.
Christopher got to sing all the cool, mellow McCartney tunes. Honey Pie.
Did he play and sing?
Blackbird, Mother Nature's Son, I Will. He did a great job, too. He knocked it out of the park.
Did he play and sing?
He did.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, and he's such a great guitar player.
Yeah.
We did a couple of his songs and just let him rip on at least one of them. Yeah. And I was like, wow.
It's amazing in that video you played how soft he was singing and how awesome, I mean, you guys sounded together. It was just this effortless, and it was just this clarion call in that little clip you sent. I thought, wow, if that's not a demonstration of like force without forceful, right? It was just like, wow. It was just this very nice little vignette. So I would love to talk for hours about this, but I think it's a culmination. I mean, when you think about it, you go from Fab Forgeries to White Album Live on stage. Like, what better target hit from a long range shot do you get, right? So I hope you're happy with that. I mean, I don't know why I'm being patronizing there, but I mean, I hope you had the same sort of, wow, like what first full circle craziness is this? And something I love. It wasn't like you doing someone you really liked. This was like your wheelhouse, right? Like, I'm going to go do this album with these guys, these awesome guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it was definitely, there's always that thing in the back of your head that you really can't take any of this for granted.
Yeah.
This whole thing could fall apart at any second.
Right.
I didn't know any of those people.
Right.
I didn't know what their professional habits were, or I didn't know what they were saying behind my back.
Right.
And so I was focused every second, even on the bus, in just doing my job, deflecting chaos, making the music as good as it could be, and just keeping my level of professional errors to an absolute minimum.
Was it fun or was it work?
It was both.
Yeah, I can imagine that
kind of stuff. Working at that level is hard.
Yeah.
Touring at that level is hard. But just it's the old cliche. The only time that seems too short is the time we get to play.
Yeah.
We didn't spend nearly enough time making music together as we needed, but we made it work, and we got better every single night.
Yeah. What was the encore?
Obla di obla da.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Why not? That's pretty fun for you to drum too, right?
Yeah, it was just a perfect little curtain call. And it's such a simple beat.
Yeah.
There's not too much. In fact, the less you do on that, the better.
Yeah. I mean, the McCartney bass line, though, too. It's just awesome. Okay. Well, hey, look, we're almost 2 hours in. I'm not keeping track of time, but I got a thing that says live 1:46:27, and I haven't had one of those before, so I realize that I could be tortured to sit across from for that long. I've checked boxes, Beatles, the albums, Lennon, White Album, Empty Nesters. I feel like there's a Cotton Mather thing that you'd probably want to shout out to Robert, your friend. Seems like you guys have done a lot of good work together and that you're in the movie together. Any comments about his strengths and weaknesses? Anything you want to say about him, or is just a hello enough?
I'm really proud of Robert because he's really coming out into his own for the first time under his own name.
Yeah.
And he's about to release a new album called Watching the Kid Come Back. And he's got a brand new single called Face in the Crowd, which is, I think it's on his Facebook page right now.
Yeah.
And he's just at the top of his game. His songwriting keeps getting better. And he's had a lot of challenges like we all have.
Yeah.
But he found himself alone and isolated during COVID in a recording studio.
Nice.
So he had nothing to do but write and record.
Yeah, good for him.
And the results are fantastic. I can't wait for you to hear it.
I will listen. And, I think the last time you said, hey, you got to pick this album up, I played on it. It was the double album he had, and there was song number 7, I remember. And I had it. I was living in Bangladesh at the time. and the traffic was so bad there, sometimes I'd keep a guitar in the car, and I'm not that good at playing the guitar, but I'd try and play along, and I couldn't play along with one of his songs. The chord progressions and the sequencing were so hard, and there was no one there to help, and I was too embarrassed to call you, but I loved listening to that album. That was one of the most intricate albums if you sat in traffic and tried to play along with it, but it was such a pleasant album. I forget the name of it now.
Future Clouds and Radar was a real adventurous project.
Right?
And a lot of it was songs that he wouldn't dare attempt with Cotton Mather or any other context.
Yeah.
But the three subsequent Cotton Mather albums benefited a lot from that experience.
I'm gathering.
And I played on several of those tracks, and George Reef came back to play on a lot of those tracks. So those, I think, Death of the Cool, yeah, that's one. Wild Kingdom,
yeah,
and I think Young Life is another one. But anyway, those three albums are stellar.
Right. I mean, not only is pop music in a term that I think I'm allowed to use, alive and well, but it's in the hands of maestros. If you categorize his music as pop music, which I think you can, right? I mean, you and I would call the Beatles pop music when it came out, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sure. And I think this is in the direct genealogy, right? And so this is some intricate, beautiful pop music that this guy puts out. And it's just like, wow. I mean, the complexity of it and the beauty of it, as with yours, you guys are in a strain of pop music that's high art. And so it's funny. And, I go back and look at those three songs on my classics list. She's Better Than Me, Don't Look at Me Down, Metro Beat, Boxing Day, Road Ahead. It's just, hey, you think you're awesome, go try and play those. Try and play those quick. It's not going to work. There's some real artistry in this stuff. So I think I'm going to move towards the ending here. And normally what we do, Roman Anton Podcast, is in 3 parts. Hopefully the audience liked hearing from Darin, and I stepped on it a lot because I was excited tonight, so I got to calm down a little bit here and let him talk. But second part is always a performance of some type. So, and Darin, if you've looked at the podcast, one of my favorite ones, Frank and I went on a court with former UCLA Bruin and former pro basketball player Ikenna Nwankno, and we D'd up against a 7-foot-tall man who has a post series, and he showed us how to play basketball, and you can watch how Frank and I get embarrassed. It looked like Frank was being held up at gunpoint. He stood and put his hands up. We had fun doing that. We've had Max Rapkin sit in the chair where your screen is here and recite some poetry. We've gone to the Dynamic Studios, which is where we record our music, and had Runkan Tatusek mix some stuff on his Neve board for us and show the audience how he was mixing one of our songs. But we love when we have musicians, and we have my favorite musician here today. Paul McCartney's my favorite musician. You're my second favorite musician. So we have my second favorite musician here, Frank. I'm sorry, you can edit that out. Here, and if would you like to play for us today? You think we can pull that off, or are we having too many technical difficulties?
I'd love to.
Great. So how about if we shut this down, and by that I mean maybe we pause and swap out batteries, but we'll keep it running. But let's end the first segment here, Darin, and how about if you and I get ready for part 2, and we'll zoom in on you for this part, and we'll talk about how we do audio pieces later. But I really appreciate your spending 2 hours with me. I know that was longer than I'd bargained for, and I apologize for the technical difficulties, but it's been great talking to you, and it was a big day for me, so I appreciate it.
Well, Joe, if not you, it's going to be me taking it longer, because you get me started and you can't shut me up.
So that's part 2 then. We'll do another one. Let's take a break here, Franco. Shut it down, and we'll have Darin get his gear ready. Maybe do a bathroom break or whatever. And on a Friday night, because we have our very, very good friend, Darin Murphy from Austin, Texas, who has said he would try and experiment with Roman Anton Podcast online. So we have Darin here. Hello again, Darin.
Hello.
Good. You have agreed to play some music for us, and that is above and beyond the duty. So I'm going to turn the floor back over to you, and I really appreciate your doing this. I'm very excited to hear what you're going to play. So.
Oh, cool. All right. Well, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn down my headphones. Now we're flying a solo. All right, I'm just gonna improv a little bit to get into this tune, and hopefully it'll take all of us where we want to go. I'll never get old. Oh, it makes me feel alive. Yeah, I'll never spend this life alone. All through my body, moving deep and slow. It gave me strength and courage like I never known. I used to wonder how it could be so, that being strong meant you gotta let go. Oh, before I realized just how much it fortifies the soul. All through my body, moving deep and slow. It gives me strength and courage like I've never known. Breathing, whenever it starts, I keep breathing. In time with my heart, I am breathing. I'll never forget about breathing. Just one breath at a time. Oh, it makes me feel alive. Yeah, I'll never spend this life alone. All through my body, moving deep and slow. It gives you strength and courage like you'll never know. Breathing, whenever it starts, I keep breathing. In time with my heart, I am breathing. I'll never forget about breathing. With just one breath at a time.
All right.
Breathing.
Nice. Well done. So that's that voice I'm talking about, man. Where'd that come from? You broke that out of some new place, huh? In the last 10 years for sure, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Huh.
I've never done any song that has that kind of vocal.
Right.
It's one of the reasons I like it a lot.
Yeah. So when did you write that?
I think it had its genesis about a decade ago.
Okay.
And at the time it lasted about 60 seconds long and I didn't have it finished. So last year I found the missing piece of the puzzle. It was at the bottom of a box and it had like dead roaches like sitting around it and stuff. I was like, oh, so stuck it in and there it is.
Breathing. And so you got some open chords in there, 12th fret. I mean, it's not even stuff that I'm used to seeing you do on the guitar too. So it's just a whole different type of chord construction for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it's also a nice exercise to, when you first learn how to play guitar,
Yeah.
you learn this chord, A minor,
Yeah.
right? And you take that to other places.
Yeah. Right. It's like
And the
Bob,
possibilities are endless.
Bob Weir guitar. No, nice. That's a beautiful song. Thanks for playing that.
Sure. Let's see. I'm going to lay one on you that you've never heard. That very few people have ever heard, actually.
Good. We're hearing it here first, ladies and gentlemen.
If you grew up anywhere near Houston, Texas, in the late 60s, 70s, all the way up to 2005, then you probably went to Astroworld, which was Houston's own Disneyland for the longest time. Astroworld closed in 2005, and I've always been really sad about that for some reason. I guess because it's just that that's a little part of your heritage that's gone, and it's just nothing but a vacant lot now. And so anyway,
Frank is nodding out at the prospects. Frank is nodding out at the prospects of Astroworld. I got to tell you, you're not getting the vibe across to Astroworld. So are there rides? You can go on rides at Astroworld?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Are there Disney-like figures?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
when Warner Brothers took it over,
There you go.
Six Flags bought it, and so anyway, there's a bunch of like Looney Tunes characters.
Looney
stuff.
Tunes. Frank's in. All
But
right.
it was just a really special place. It was a great amusement park to go to, and you just wanted to stay there all day. You hated to leave.
Naturally.
And it had these little unique rides on it that were unique to any other place. So anyway, I just took all the imagery that I remember from it and tied it into a much more profound theme about our humanity and made a little song called The Boneyard.
Nice.
And it goes like this. There's nothing to think or to feel. The moment you die, the soul leaves and takes the mind. And except for the things you create, the things you design, you don't leave a trace behind. Snowflakes on an alpine sleigh. The moments hang on for a moment and then they're gone. Ooh, and as quick as a gunslinger's draw, you send them along, put them behind and move on. If you're driving, would you drive me by the Boneyard, where the maypoles and black dragons come to rest? We'll be holding vigil around the globe at midnight, in the middle of fun, the middle of fun. Of an acre of land goes on without end, like a river, no return. Yeah, like the lights on the astro wheel, the flame in my heart now and forever burn, forever burn. If you're driving, would you drive me by the Boneyard, where the vipers and black dragons come to rest? We'll be holding vigil vigil around the globe at midnight, in the middle of fun, the middle of fun. If you're driving, won't you try and be by the Boneyard, where the maples and black dragons come to rest. We'll be holding vigil around the globe at midnight, in the middle of fun, the middle of fun.
Nice. I mean, I'm so happy you went back to the line. If you're driving, would you drive me around the Boneyard? That's such a great line. That's such a, I mean, I sort of rely on you to come up with those lines because it's a thinking, speaking thing, but that's so nice. And then the don't leave a trace, and then into the minor key change or the chord progression that you do is just sweet. That's a great song. And it's you're right, it's really evocative imagery in there. And when you talk about the lights in the astral world or the astral wheel, it's just like, well done. I'm a big fan of that. One listen in. That's good melody, right, Frank? I mean, that's sort of how I'm used to Frank writing, maybe a little bit like that, but that's, you heard it here. What are you calling it? The Boneyard? That's the title?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, I was reading an article about the demise of Astroworld, and they were doing a little profile of all the iconic rides that were there.
Was there a roller coaster?
And oh yeah.
What was it called?
Yeah, it was called the Texas Cyclone.
Nice,
and
of course it
was
had to be Cyclone.
an inverted replica of the original Cyclone in Coney Island.
Oh, nice. So rickety old.
And it was, for a while, it was rated as the most exciting roller coaster in the world. And
by an authority, right? The Roller Coasters Association guide. Number 1?
Yeah.
All right.
There was also the Alpine Sleigh Ride,
nice,
which was unique to Astroworld. I really can't think of anything else to compare it to. But it's just an innocent little ride. But it was so iconic for that particular park. Anyway, this article was talking about the rides and what happened to them. Some of them were broken down and relocated to other Six Flags parts around the country. Nice. And there were some that just ended up in the Boneyard.
In the Boneyard.
And I was like, oh, the Boneyard. That's what the song's going to be about.
Yeah, but it's the Boneyard of dreams, right? It's and some of them didn't leave a trace behind, which is, I mean, I think back of the song we talked about that you had the extra instruments to talk about. There's that notion of where you're going to spread your ashes and, right on. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Where do you want me to place your ashes?
Yeah, you don't leave a trace behind.
It's an essential truth.
Yeah.
We're ashes to ashes. We're dust to dust. And what we create while we're here is the only thing that stays around.
Preach.
If we're lucky.
Yeah. Hey, talk to me about your gear a little bit. You have educated me over the years when I've needed education. I'm too embarrassed to go in the local guitar store and ask what stuff's for. But I noticed in some of your videos a new guitar or two. But are you out shopping all the time, or do you have your core gear that you use? I've seen overhead shots of your home studio. It seems like you have some old tried and true stuff, but some new stuff. Anything you want to talk about, or is that for another day?
This is one of the oldest guitars that I own. And it's an old Harmony from the mid-'60s. And it's one of those guitars that just landed in my hands. And I put some money into getting it set up, and the neck was kind of falling apart, and so I had it repaired. And recently it's become one of my favorite guitars. I just love the way it plays and love the way it sounds. So that's why I picked that for this day.
Yeah. Any other? I mean, I liked how when you were picking on it, I liked the sound that it made when you were doing the intro and the closing of that last song. It's just had a nice nice twangy sort of soft twangy sound to it that was very cool. So it's a nice sounding guitar.
Yeah, this has a terrific tone to it.
Yeah.
I had to get used to playing it because the action is really high, so it's a great practice guitar for me.
I can't see that from here, but it
But
looks,
now I just I'm using it all the time. I record with it. I can't plug it in,
right.
but it's perfect for little things like this, for live streams and interviews and whatnot.
Good. Any other stuff you want to talk about? Any other goodies you have, or any things that are essential to the Darin Murphy live show or home recording studio that you would want to get on the record if you haven't put it on the record somewhere else?
I just don't know how interesting it is.
Hey, I'm interested, bro. I just called you bro. I never say bro. So, bro, I'm
well,
interested.
I've got here's is interesting. I've got a black Epiphone Casino that was a gift from Don Scardino
Nice.
when Lennon the Musical opened on Broadway.
Wow.
And I still have that guitar, and I use it on stage. I use it in the studio. You might have seen on my YouTube channel a video of Boxing Day, which I did ostensibly live during COVID.
Right.
And so the casino is on that.
Okay. I had a question to ask you about that. Was that really
And this
live?
is on that.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well, good. So you used to have a silver sparkly Fender that you played that was around the house, but I would see you leave it on the couch and stuff, and I thought, is that his go-to weapon, or is that the one that Dexter's going to jump on when he's jumping on the couch?
It's still one of my favorite guitars.
Yeah, okay.
And I've put some money into even making it better.
Good.
And yeah, it sounds better than ever before. It's all over my records.
Yeah. Tried
And it'll be on the next ones as well. I just love that thing.
Yeah, well, there it is. Yeah, you're sort of a equipment junkie from certain eras as well, so it's always interesting to get your feedback. Well, you got anything else for us? You got grabbing a big tool there. What do you got?
This is the cheap Fender 12-string.
Nice.
Another guitar that just landed in my lap.
Nice.
But it's such a workhorse of a guitar. It's a great writing tool. So I'm going to use this to play another song that you've never heard, I don't think.
That's all right.
It's an old one. It's just one that I've never recorded. Now, the backstory to the song is called Exile, but this has some of your favorite things. It's got some NASA stuff in there.
Okay.
But I actually wrote this song after my mother left my father, and kind of wrote it from the perspective of a man who's just been wrenched out of a relationship and having to come to terms with it and wrap his head around it. And sometimes you have to step back from it. And how far do you step back? I don't know. You might have to take a trip around the moon and get off on the isolation from it. So that's where that came from.
All right.
Exile.
Cool.
On a free return trajectory, forwards and outwards for thousands of miles, this has got the best of me. To fall asleep a man and wake up a child, is there any stopping this from happening? No one catches when you fall out of grace. What can I have done and who should I have been? Is that who's gonna stand in my place? So get in some distance where logic flows and the vision is clear. No more resistance. Places and times mean nothing out here. No actions to fear, no words to adhere. Loss of signal coming up in 10. Sayonara to all of the things I believe. Seas of lovers with islands of friends. Toxic emotions that I wear on my sleeve. There's a lot of things I'll never understand. The locks on the bedroom, the notes on the fridge. There's a vessel sinking under my command. Am I supposed to die on the bridge? Oh, getting some distance where logic flows and the vision is clear. No more resistance. Places and times mean nothing out here. No actions to fear, no words to adhere. No actions to fear, no words to adhere. No actions to fear, no words to adhere.
Nice one. Very nice. I like that. Getting some distance. Man, so what are you calling the title of that?
I'm calling it Exile.
Exile.
But maybe it should be Getting Some Distance.
No, I mean, I thought that series of wording there was very nice because I think it was really the lesson, huh? Is we got to get away from this whole thing to understand it, right? So why not out in space, right? Your standard metaphor for good distance, right? Yeah.
Sometimes you need a place where you can go to escape judgment of any sort.
You know, I hate saying this, like, oh, that sounded like, or this sounds like that, because, and I very rarely do that with you, but, you know, I was trying to find an equivalent influence from the arsenal of musicians you've talked to that would have inspired you to write something like that. And I don't come up with one, and I shouldn't have to, but it was very interesting. I quickly abandoned the idea of not listening and trying to match it who inspired this, but it was a very unique sound for you, that one, but I didn't link it to someone. You know, I don't know why I try to do that. I think that's probably a dumb thing to do with a musician, to say, oh, you sound like Paul McCartney or something. It's ridiculous to say, but were you influenced by someone for that, or do you feel like this was one of your true Darin moments when you were putting words to, you know, exile, you know, when your dad left or when your mom left, however that worked? Was this a true moment inspiration and you had a guitar and it evolved into 12-string or whatever?
Yeah. A lot of times when you're writing a song, you just do what the music tells you to do. And hopefully the influences are so blended that they become non-specific.
Yeah.
And it's just a culmination of a lifetime of education.
Yeah.
That allows you to put something together that the listener can't always put their finger in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, right? I know at some point in this discussion in the last couple hours we talked about, you know, that mid to late 90s period in Radiohead as an influence. You know, I think about Emerson, Lake and Palmer all the time as musical influences and stuff that anything that was in the progeny of Emerson, Lake and Palmer I love to listen to, but it's rare you hear the 12-string in a solo song like that right now, and that was cool to see, right? A nice solo, and I'm sure you have a whole band arrangement for it, but it's nice to hear that as a solo 12-string with the lyrics. So I
actually did record that song.
Yeah, good.
But
it's hidden.
I hated the way I sang it, so I never put it out. And I wish I'd sung it better because George Reef played bass on it.
Nice.
And he's gone now.
Yeah.
So I may end up issuing it as a bonus track. But it's definitely one that I want to take another stab at the vocals on. And I don't have access to the masters, so I'd have to start from scratch.
Right.
With the 12-string, because the original recording has a 6-string guitar.
Oh, cool. Okay. Well, there it is, right? So
I'm just treating that as a demo.
Yeah, or a rooftop. Right, get your rooftop. Nice. Well, that was cool. I'm glad we got to hear that. Exile.
Do you have any requests, Joe?
Yes, I have 21 requests, but I heard you play the rooftop. Sort of changed it this week. I don't know if you've played Down or Don't Look at Me recently, and you had mentioned you liked playing the drums on one or the two of those in our interview today, but I don't know if either of those are on the tip of your fingers. Down or Don't Look at Me?
I think so. Hang on, let me get something else.
Or would love to hear She's Better Than Me, You Know That, right?
Yeah. Don't Look at Me was one of those songs that I wrote, and I had no idea what it was about. Until about 3 years later, when I went to Rome and I went to the Sistine Chapel, and I was staring at Michelangelo's Last Judgment, and I must have just stood there frozen, transfixed for about 30 minutes, looking at that entire wall and all of the imagery on it. And only then was when I knew what the song I'd written 3 years earlier was about in any way. How come you're staring at me like that? Do you think I have an answer for you? Are you deaf and you're blind? But your mouth seems to work just fine. Don't look at me, you're on your own. Stay away from me. How can you tell me that you don't know, when it was all laid out for you 30 years ago? You had to read between the lines. I guess no one told you in time. Don't look at me, you're on your own. Stay away from me. You say it's good to have a friend like me around, when your heart lies in pieces on the ground. You could have faked a better smile. How soon an inch becomes a mile. Don't look at me, you're on your own. Stay away from me. Don't look at me, you're on your own. Don't you know you got a backlog of outdated knowledge running in your head like desiccated garbage? And all the work you've done and all the things you've saved ain't gonna help you now. 2,000 years have come and gone, and still you wonder where you went wrong. Don't look at me, you're on your own. Stay away from me. Stay away from me. Stay away from me.
Yeah, all right. Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. That is a true pleasure to hear that live. That was awesome. That sounded spectacular. I really like that song. And
Thank
like
you.
I
It's
said,
been a long
right?
time since I've done that.
3 verses, right? It's uncharacteristic. It's a 5-minute song, I think, on the album.
Yeah, is it?
Yeah, it's
Wow.
and it rolls. It's good. So the beginning to Down. I just realized I'm going to make the song that I've written that Frank likes to play the most when we go out is called She's Ready to Go. And as I sat here and thought about this evening before we started talking, the opening to Down, listen. Did I steal that from him? I'm asking it live on television here if I can get an infringement waiver. But there you go, Frank. I'm making an admission to a bandmate here that I may have been a little liberal with the hoisting of...
Hang on. There we go.
So sorry about that. I just wanted Frank. It's a band admission. You got caught up in a intrigue, palace intrigue here, Darren. I think I may have stolen a song from you. I've been passing it off in Bangkok as my own. So sorry.
Oh, well, that's all right, because I found out that I stole that song from someone else.
Good. So we're both hunted.
I wrote it, and I recorded it, and I released it, and then I heard a song that was like, oh my God.
What was it?
I totally ripped that song off. I think it was totally subconscious.
Who was it?
But
can you say?
Elvis Costello's Party Girl.
Oh, geez. That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Well, there it is. All right. Sorry, Elvis. God bless you.
I had no idea.
Well, there it is. Well, good. So I don't, it's interesting. So many of them I want to hear. I'm not pitching out any more songs, but Road Ahead is Paved with Bathrooms is sort of an orphan because it doesn't have an album yet. And I assume you're going to compile some of these interstitial songs to throw on your albums, or you're entitled to, I would think. But do you leave some of these just float out there as solo songs? Do you gather them, rope them up, and herd the cattle, or what's the plan when you have some gaps in time between releases now? It's sort of a interesting.
Yeah, it's really tough. I think the biggest challenge for me is just finding a collection of songs that go together.
Right.
Not that they have to have a theme tied to them, but they just have to kind of have a similar feel.
All right. And if I think about what
the people that I admire the most are people like Beck, who releases albums that have songs that go well together, that flow one into the other. And you won't find like a song off of Sea Change, for example, intermingling with something off of The Information or Midnight Vultures.
Right.
His songwriting is just all over the damn place.
Yeah. Well, and look at Breathing, right? I mean, do you put that with The Road Ahead is Paved with Bastards? I mean, those are two temporally different time periods for Darin Murphy, right? So that album's frustrated unless you bookend it, right? And do sort of like Zero G or something, which is like, whoa, what happened? It's a gear change, but it was appropriate for that album. So interesting. So anything else you want to play for us? I know we're on borrowed time at this point, but you got anything else?
Let's see here. What have I got? I know there's always going to be one that escapes me, but I tell you what I'll do. I'm going to do, since you mentioned She's Better Than Me, which is one of my favorites, I'll go ahead and play that one.
Nice.
I got to make sure I remember how to play it.
Yeah, look at that. That's not where I play it. Okay. Yeah.
In fact, I'm going to do a completely different on-the-spot arrangement for you for your entertainment pleasure. I need to catch my breath, I think I'll step outside. When she comes down the stairs, well, I feel so sick inside, wondering if she'll ever look this way again. I blend into the furniture, but That's all I am to her. And every time she looks at me, I trick myself into thinking we could be something bigger than the both of us. But we can't, 'cause she's better than me. Well, I'd have given up both my arms and legs that day just to have one stroke of good fortune come into play. I was just believing in myself again, and then I showed up at her door. What did I do that for? I like to think that just because she doesn't like what I have to offer doesn't mean that she doesn't like me, but it does. 'Cause she's better than me. She's better than every day is the same, out of sight, out of mind. Another slap in the face might help me decide. Should I open a vein or look again through the blinds to catch another glimpse of her and her? Her and her. Her and her. Her and her. I like to think that just because she doesn't like what I have to offer doesn't mean that she doesn't like me, but it does. 'Cause she's better than me. She's better than me. She's better than me. She's better than me. Ah, 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 ah. 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 Oh, oh. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Darin Murphy, ladies and gentlemen, on the Roman Anton Podcast, singing from his album Haunted Gardenias and Solitarium, and some unreleased material and some solo stuff that's floating around out there, and you can see a lot of it, and I'd recommend you take a look at his Facebook. Is that at Darin Murphy on Facebook? Were you able to land that, and that's just Darin Murphy?
There's Darin Murphy. There's also Darin P. Murphy, which is more of a personal page.
Okay, good. So Darin Murphy, and the name, which I didn't know this, but when I watched you play on the roof, you say, named after Bobby Darin because my mom and dad were big fans, and that's when you played Beyond the Sea, and I did not know that. That
right.
was a fact about Darin. So you got to look hard, you got to study, you got to read, and you got to listen. But if you watch that hour broadcast, he reveals that little detail. So I really appreciate your playing that set of songs, and I'm glad you showed me some new stuff because it really is shown a evolution that has been my pleasure to watch over the last many years. And I'm glad you came on tonight. In the Roman Anton Podcast, we have three things, though, Darin. It's not over. You don't get out free. The last piece, in a non-COVID environment, and if you were 10,000 miles closer to me, we would hit the streets of Bangkok. So we're making do here. We're going to walk very close here. So close, in fact, that we're going to pick up a phone. Are we going to do it that way, Frank? Are we just going to walk out the door and go take some snapshots here? Yeah. And I'm going to explain to you where we are, and this will be yours and my virtual tour of Bangkok. You will be looking out at the Asoke neighborhood, A-S-O-K-E, which is also called Vadana or Watana, and we'll be looking out at a part of town called Klong Toey. And it's very dark out right now because it's almost midnight, but you might see some very, very tall skyscrapers that are called the Millennium Towers, which we will see. I think that's what they're called. and then you will see the Golden Tulip Hotel, and you will see the horizon. So hopefully you will be able to see from your phone the streets of Bangkok, and we will kill that exercise very quickly if you can't see anything. We are not film guys, but we're going to have our third part of the Roman Anton podcast be straight down this door. So we're going to walk out there, and you won't have to do anything. Right, Frank? He's just going to sit there, and we're going to talk to him.
Okay.
So Frank is trying that right now, but I wanted to thank you for those songs, but I didn't want you to give your parting words here because we have one more segment to do. But those are great songs, and they sound great, and it's really a pleasure to have you do this for me, Darin. So I thank you.
Oh,
for
that's
playing.
great.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's not over because I haven't been able to tell anyone about my YouTube channel yet.
Yes, tell me that right now while Frank is getting the gig to work. YouTube
You can
channel.
find a lot of exclusive content on my YouTube channel, including some footage of the super band Skyrocket. And there's also a really goofy video that I made that's based on this little girl who wrote a little song called I Wonder What's Inside Your Butthole. And it went viral last year during COVID. It was all over the place. And there were all of these different people that were making these different interpretations of the song.
Okay.
And some of them were beautiful and some of them were punk rock. And I said, well, what if she had the Beatles as a backup band? So I made a little short video
Okay. I think
of her singing with the Beatles backing her up.
I didn't click on that. It's one of the few things I didn't click on because I didn't know what I was about to get into, but I will go back to the page. So you do have some good material in there, and you have on your YouTube channel, you have the Getting Better All the Time video that you did with a friend of yours or a buddy of yours, Heath Allen. Did I get that right?
Yeah. He's another actor and musician in Austin that came to me and said, hey, well, you want to help me out with this tune?
Beatles song.
Like, sure.
Right.
What else have I got to do?
Right. Sounded good, right?
There's also a trailer for Empty Nester's Handbook and
yeah.
maybe even My Ranger. I'm not
Yes.
sure.
Yeah, they were both. I was able to land on both of those, but I wasn't sure if the My Ranger one was on your site. But yeah, some good stuff in there and some real interesting stuff. And I would hope folks who are listening will take the time to go through that. But Frank, are we going to walk out the door right now? Okay, so Darin, you can hold on to your guitar or not, but if you wait with us,
I'm not taking this out into the night. Are you kidding me?
All right, there we go. That's what I was saying. You got to protect your beauty. It's older than you almost. So we're going to walk, Frank.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. So bear with us, Darin, and this may go quickly, and I may say goodbye to you, but let's give this a shot and see what happens. This is the first Roman Anton semi-live walking, recording, and doing all sorts of stuff. Here we go.
Okay, so I have to put you down and then put the other one here.
Absolutely gorgeous view of your hand. Oops.
It's my neighborhood. That's the best I can do for you.
I can only
Thanks,
imagine.
Darin. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's great to be here.
treat, quiet.